Hello, I'm Anne McLean for Concerts from the Library of Congress. This week we're presenting two exhilarating and energizing concerts by the extraordinary FLUX Quartet. Tonight, FLUX performs works by masters of experimental jazz Oliver Lake, Roscoe Mitchell, Ornette Coleman, and Leroy Jenkins. And tomorrow, another invigorating lineup of visionaries with Nan Caro, Chelsea, Muhal Richard Abrams, and others. And I'm so pleased to be talking today with violinist and Flux founder Tom Chiu and saxophonist and composer Oliver Lake. Welcome.
Thank you.
Oliver, it's so great to see you again, and we are excited about presenting your piece Movements, Turns, and Switches, which was a Library of Congress commission in 1996 as part of this program.
Well,
And have you performed?
I was so glad to hear that it was going to be performed again, and it was great to see you after so many years.
Exactly, and this concert really underlines the stunning track record that you both have. Flux for daring and uncompromising, challenging music of many styles, way beyond genre, especially avant masters and individualists. And Oliver, for you, you are so known as a person who always has a fresh and vibrant, a new take. And it really relates to the movements, turns, and switches titles, new directions of everything. I wanted to ask you about this high wire lifestyle for Flux. You've talked about the fact that you're drawn to risk taking and experimentation. It certainly shows in this program. How did you start this, and why does it continue?
Um, let me give you a general response about that, which is, when you accumulate more knowledge in any discipline, then you just want to go further. So
Mhm.
I mean, and this doesn't just apply to music; it really applies to everything. So I think um, I mean I suppose that thank God that is in my DNA, right? and then it just continued to develop, you know, and this what you call the high wire live act type of music is the music I'm drawn to.
You know, the three pieces, I wanted to talk with you both about the three pieces from the recording you made together, right on up, that we'll be hearing on this program. I know your collaboration has extended for almost 20 years now, I think, right?
That's correct.
What
Yeah,
draws you?
we go back to 2001.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. Um, regarding the first piece that we'll hear, Hey Now Hey, Oliver, you sent me a note about this, which is interesting. I wanted to ask you to give the background on that.
Yes, I had dedicated this inspiration for this piece came from a poet named Hart Leroy Bibbs, who I met in Paris in the early 70s. And he was known as a one-word poet. He would, and he would say, and his poem that he recited was called "Hey Now," and he would say that in many inflections as he could, and it inspired me to write a repetitious piece, and this is what I came up with, and to have the Flux perform it is really great.
You know, I noticed that you said in this piece and others, you leave room, of course, for improvisation. And that's one of the things I wanted to ask you both to talk about is the relationship in all the pieces on your program today, between composition and improvisation, and how they meld together and coalesce and come back and forth and change directions.
Well, I'm very comfortable leaving room for improvisation with such great improvisers as Tom Chiu and the Flux Quartet. And I think that's a big part of my composition. I've always wanted to have improvisation as a part of it, and integrating that in these three pieces is my goal, and I feel really good about it.
I know that's something that is very important to Roscoe Mitchell as well, and he talks about composition in real time. which is an interesting phrase that I was interested to learn about. And I read something I wanted to mention to you about, people say, well, once a piece is recorded, you can't tell whether it was improvised or composed. But I happened to read a comment from someone, it might have been Roscoe Mitchell, saying that in fact, occasionally you can tell on a recording because there's a certain spark when people, a spark of color or an attack or something that is in the moment. What do you think about that?
Well, I find it interesting because every time you do a piece, it's like the piece is brand new. And because of the players and the inspiration and the timing and so forth. So I think the excitement is there with improvisation as well as composition in real time.
I wanted to mention that the composers on this program have been involved with very significant socio-cultural movements over time. And you founded the Black Artist Group in St. Louis. And the other people on the program have been involved for a long time with the AACM. But also you've been involved in art and movements about art and education. And you, Oliver, are a painter as well, right? This fits right in with Flux. And I wanted to say, how does this connection inspire you together as partners, the relationship to art?
Well, I think of all of it being the same thing, the art, the music, the poetry, as one, everything is one. It's about creativity. And to be associated with such a vibrant group as Flux for these past 20 years has been really great.
Tom, the name, your quartet's name relates to the world of art, the experience of art. Can you expound on how you chose
it? Is it homage to the Fluxus movement? That is correct. The name, I mean, that's part of it. There are other parts of it, like there are the actual word flux and the different definition the word has, kind of like something in flow or something in transition. I mean, that also speaks very directly to, I think, our programming philosophy and, the variety of genres and styles we're drawn to. And I don't know, I think any four-letter word that has the letter X is quite catchy. So, I mean, that's how the name initially came about. And with Fluxus, I have a personal. It's such a wild, just like anything goes artistic movement, and it's a lot of it, defies any associations with the mainstream, and I mean, it's just a lot of the artists associated with that and the works they have created. They're just so fascinating,
The fascination that you feel and your choice of repertoire is very evident. And I was thinking about this comment from the critic Steve Smith, where he says, you guys go after the pricklier corners of the repertoire in both jazz and classical. But of course, we don't need to think about separating jazz and classical. And that's one of the things I wanted to ask you to talk further about as we look at Ornette Coleman and Leroy Jenkins. But first, Oliver, you made a comment that I saw somewhere about how the blues remains an underlying foundation for you musically in the music that you create. And I was interested in this because I don't necessarily think of blues in connection with experimental jazz per se.
Well, I think from doing my solo concerts, from writing for a big band, writing for string quartets, writing for orchestras, I think that one line goes through there. The blues line is in there. It may be very subtle, but it's there throughout all of my compositions and especially in my playing.
It was so interesting to me because I was telling my colleague David Plylar the other day that I remember the concert with Muhal Richard Abrams that we did a number of years back at the Kennedy Center. And he too was commissioned by the library, and you will hear this piece on tomorrow's concert by Flux. But at the end of the concert, after this piece, which inhabits a space between these worlds we're talking about, jazz and classical music, um, I was amazed and very touched to hear him conduct a blues encore with the players that were involved. I think it was String Trio of New York and a couple of other players. But I was just stunned by this gorgeous presentation of thinking. And it wasn't what I was expecting after that. But I just wanted to mention that because he's such an influential figure. Um, in terms of Roscoe Mitchell, he too is a person whose music reflects many influences. And the piece that you'll be playing, the 9999, um, I wanted to ask you to comment on that. And also the cards. It says 9999 with cards. What are the cards? Is that graphic notation?
The cards, I think you may have, this was a little bit fresh off the plate, but you may notice that he dated the piece 2009/11 with a revision 2021. So the version we're listening to on your program is pretty much completely fresh. Originally, and we first played this piece back in 2000s. I guess it was around the 2009, 2000, around that time. It was actually, originally the piece was just we each had a set of 6 cards. And the cards are fully notated. The information on the cards is fully notated music. But what he did was, on, let's say, any full 8.5 by 11 piece of notated music, he just cut like a portion of it. So if you can imagine, it's notated, but it's a little bit disconnected and disjunct, right? Because some lines of information was not complete. It's been cut. So it's a little bit, I don't know, it's almost like, it's almost like overlaps with concept of sampling, that you kind of just like cut the music. And so each of these cards had about, let's say, 6 fragmented lines of music. And then we had another choice of individually kind of either picking what cards we want to play or leaving it up to chance and just shuffling the cards. So that's the card aspect. And then for this very this 2021 version, he composed. He added 3 composed sections. So he kind of added some structure, a new structure to the piece, and then contrasted those sections with the sections where we play cards.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Another composer that you've had a deep personal connection to is Ornette Coleman. You personally have had a friendship with him for many years. And he also wrote several works for string quartet like you, Oliver, over time, including the dedication to poets and writers that you're playing. Was this from the 1962 town hall recording?
It is that piece, yes. Mm-hmm.
And it's a multi-movement work, which interested me because I heard it as a kind of a painting, a multi-canvas painting, like a diptych or a triptych or something like that. Mm-hmm. I don't usually think in those terms. I'm not so visually oriented. But if you would like to talk about this in terms of the overall structure and what people will hear, how you view it.
Yeah, I can relate to your description and your association with something visual. The piece is in 4 movements, and each movement has 2 sections, and I would say two contrasting sections, and I think each of the sections just has its own unique characteristic to it, and I think um, in our explorations of the piece, we try to capture the unique character of each section, and also we um, try to understand that this music comes from Ornette, and knowing Ornette's own playing, try to relate as closely to that as possible.
Mm-hmm. That's a good segue back maybe to Oliver, to your pieces, um, that the piece you'll be performing at the end of the program. Before we talk about the last works on the program, do you have some comments about Leroy Jenkins? I know he was involved with Anthony Braxton, another composer whom we have commissioned, and Threadgill, I believe, in Paris. And of course, Oliver, you too had quite a long period in Paris. And there was just such an amazing scene. This music was accepted tremendously warmly there, perhaps more than anybody would have thought of in the US at that time.
Yes, Leroy was a fantastic musician and a great personality. And I had a long playing association with him. We had a duet that we performed for several years. And recently I discovered a duo recording that we did that I'm going to release sometime this year. He was an extraordinary player, and I love him and miss him very much.
And the string thread goes so much through this whole thing. As I say, so the composers on this program you guys have chosen explored so many aspects of string writing over the years that are now a part of our experience every day in our canon. And thinking about, I watched your recording, which is beautiful, beautifully made, and there are just so many colors and textures that I think were brought into the classical realm through these compositions as well. And of course, mixing and becoming a part of the vocabulary, the lexicon.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Any particular comments on that in terms of string writing and techniques, extended techniques?
Well, Leroy was a violinist himself, so he's writing music that he's very idiomatically connected to. I just want to follow up on Oliver's saying he has a great personality. I feel very blessed that we were able to work directly with each of these, great or extraordinary musicians. And I guess we played Leroy's piece in 2004. So, and he passed, I think, in 2008. So it was very fortunate to, catch him at the end, and working with him directly. And also, he also demonstrated and played. And I think, getting to see his playing and getting to know his personality, like, really gave us a much greater insight on just the playfulness and humor of this piece. Yeah.
Wonderful.
And it's just a raucous. I think the listeners can pick up that this piece is just one big party.
So to come back to your other two works, Oliver, which I'd love to just look at for a moment with you. The last piece on the program, Five Sisters, I know is a very personal piece for you. But before getting back to that, what comments would you like to have our viewers take away on movements, turns, and switches, our commission?
Well, I think the fact that the title itself gives a good definition of what the listeners can expect. Movements, turns, and switches. It goes through several changes and several colors, several feelings and moods and so forth. And I think the listeners just can go along, just go with the flow.
And you chose to end this concert with Five Sisters, which you recorded as part of that New York Times acclaimed recording just 3 years ago. And I know this relates to your family and life in St. Louis, and I wanted to ask you about that.
Yes, well, the Five Sisters, the reference is to my 4 aunts and my mother. and that's the Five Sisters. And they had a restaurant there called the Five Sisters Restaurant, and that was a big part of me growing up. On my way to school, I'd grab breakfast from there, and throughout my course of the day or the course of the week, it was a big part of my family. So I felt really great about dedicating this piece to the Five Sisters.
And I think you were writing somewhere that your family was actually involved in several different businesses in one corner of your neighborhood in St. Louis. And
That's
it was
right.
a huge influence by the extended Lake family.
Exactly. It taught me how to hustle. Because my mom we had a pool room, we had a car wash, I had a shoe shine parlor, and the restaurant was there, and it was all lined up on the same block. So I had a phrase I used to say, my mom is breaking glass. She used to collect bottles and break them up and sell them for 25 cents a bushel basket. So she had all of these businesses going, but she still broke glass. So the lesson she taught me was hustle. And that's been an inspiration in my writing and in my life throughout my career.
And in the Black Artist Group that you founded, you took this lesson into creating educational opportunities for so many people at so many levels, very young people, students, kids.
Right. The Black Artist Group was a great school, not only for the students, but for the teachers. I learned a lot myself. I consider my schooling, even though I was one of the founders of the Black Artist Group, I consider Black Artist Group as a school for me because I learned so much from that from the participation in that organization.
This is it's going to be a great concert, and I'm so pleased to be able to have both of you and your
Well, I'm so
colleagues.
glad you invited me back.
Sure, and with Corey Smythe too, the pianist, who'll be performing your work. And before we close, I wanted to just say, return to you, Tom, in terms of your overall tremendously wide open attitude towards so many projects, and mention how interested and excited we were to learn that you had been doing the onstage band work for Pam Tanowitz's Bartok Ballet.
Mhm.
This brings us to another major commission, a landmark commission for the library, the Bartok Fifth String Quartet.
Oh, okay.
So I just was going to say how much we are thrilled to have this historic trajectory.
Oh, that's tremendous. Well, I'm honored to be part of that galaxy, I guess.
Great. Well, thank you both so much. I really appreciate your taking the time, and I know this will be a very, very inspiring concert for all the viewers.
Thank
Thanks a
you.
lot.
Thank you.
So much.
Bye-bye now.